Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to warmly welcome you to today's webinar, Rights in the Digital Space. On behalf of European Center for Press and Media Freedom and Balkan Investigative Reporting Network, I am Amina Mahovic. I'm Digital Rights Program Manager at Bern, and I will be your host for today. Before we dive into today's session and agenda, I want to share that the whole idea behind this jointly organized webinar was to bring together a diverse group of digital rights experts, researchers, but also journalists to not only discuss recent trends in the digital sphere, but also explore how these trends impact media and internet freedoms. I also understand that many organizations and individuals are affected by US funding freeze, and I want to express my gratitude to all of you who are today with us. Definitely your willingness to engage in these critical discussions means a lot, especially as we explore how these recent trends affect our everyday work, especially in digital rights. So when it comes to today's agenda, we have amazing speakers that you can see on the screen, who will share the latest findings from the reports recently published by Bern and ECPMF. And we will also cover the influence of big tech on digital rights and media freedoms. And we will wrap up today's session focusing on the challenges faced by independent media and journalists. Before we start with the presentation of the reports, I also want to share some housekeeping rules. The webinar will last for 1.5 or 2 hours. It depends on your questions. It will also be recorded, as you can see, and I strongly encourage you to ask any questions you might have using this Q&A option in the bottom. Also, you are welcome to engage in the chat if you have some comments or anything else you would like to share with everyone here. With that being said, I think we can start with our first session for today. A brief overview of the key findings from Bern's Digital Rights Annual Report published in December 2024, as well as insights from the Media Freedom Monitoring Tool published last week by ECPMF. These will be presented by Ivana Jeremic from Bern and Kara Reker from ECPMF. Ivana and Kara, the floor is all yours now. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina. Maybe I can start. Hello, everyone. I'm really looking forward to this webinar, and I'm really glad I had the opportunity to talk a little bit about the report we published in December of 2024. And as you know, it's been 2 months, but it's been so intense when it comes to digital rights in the region, with everything that's been going on with the protests, boycotts, elections. The topic of digital rights have never been more interesting to follow. And I just want to say that we also have a pleasure and the opportunity to present our work in Taipei at RightsCon. So if any one of you is coming to Taipei, please ping me a message and we could meet and further discuss. For today, I would just briefly go through some of the main findings from our previous report. As you know, BIM covers some 10 countries: Western Balkans, Croatia, Romania, Hungary, and Turkey. We've been doing this for years, and we've been constantly developing new ways of how to report about this, how to map the most important trends, how to explain them to the broader public as well. And we've this year we are implementing a new methodology, and I'm really looking forward to our next report, which will obviously be published end of this year, where we try to be even more to the point, and where we try to really touch upon the new emerging trends that we've seen every day. As for the last year, BIN was able to identify some 1,700 plus significant violations. We always explain that these are not all the violations that are happening in the digital space, but these are the violations that we were more confident reporting about, but we also saw them as either examples of some viral trend or something that has a lot of consequences, or something that is an emerging trend. And you would see that in our previous report, we only scratched the use of the artificial intelligence when it comes to the creation of deep fakes and so on. But in this report, we gave it a significantly more space because we've seen that there has been multiple cases since we started focusing on the use and the abuse of artificial intelligence to create explicit photos, either when it comes to when it comes to children and minors or female. We also published a couple of investigative pieces related to these topics. So that's also another added value to what we're doing constantly by monitoring digital rights, is basically finding ideas for broader investigations that can present some systematic problems, but that can also start the debate and hopefully do some benefit and make the governments and the public be more aware, but also to take some activities in regards to the regulation, but also when it comes to big tech and so on. So we've seen that hate speech and disinformation have remained an issue. Discrimination, genocide denial, foreign influence, and disinformation as are the key violations in this region. Maybe some of the speakers will also mention the genocide denial and the problems we had with Facebook, for instance, because some of our stories and the stories of our colleagues were falsely flagged as genocide denial, although we were reporting about those people who are actually denying genocide, or we were reporting about the events related to the Srebrenica genocide and so on. So we were in some kind of a communication with Meta in order to bring back these reports back on the network. But we've seen many cases in which that kind of content was falsely flagged as part of the content moderation. We've seen the rise, emerging threat to, let's say, is AI-generated videos and photos and voice recordings in Turkey, Serbia, and Croatia. We've also seen some intents to adopt the foreign agents law in Republika Srpska, for instance, and we've seen some ideas in Serbia as well. And the announcement of these countries being ready to adopt these laws was actually used to further harass and threaten independent media and NGOs. And we've seen, especially in Serbia nowadays, with all the protests, how this is still somewhere in the air. They said that they will not adopt it, but at the same time, it's being used by pro-government media and tabloids in order to further harass those who speak and report about the breaking issues. So journalists remain one of the most attacked and one of the most affected parties when it comes to digital rights violations, as well as LGBTI community and minorities. We've also seen with the elections, we've seen a lot of disinformation around the events. Obviously, what's happening online, where we have tabloids reporting about different things and presenting either some partial facts or complete nonsense as facts, and then further using it to harass people online, as these reports are being used by bots and people, anonymous users who are basically working for pro-government parties. This is, in short, some of the main findings. I would really like to call anyone who didn't get the opportunity to see our report to take a look. We're also open for any suggestion, any new ideas. If anyone is interested to cooperate further on investigating some of the topics, we're also open for any contribution and cooperation. So Thank you. Hope this was useful.
Thank you, Ivana. So I think that means I'm taking over. I'm Kara Reka from the European Centre for Press and Media Freedom. We published the monitoring report for 2024 a week ago. And I'm very happy to introduce the findings here today. Some of the things that have just been introduced with the Digital Rights Report are also reflected in the findings of the monitoring report. Just in general about the report, this is a project co-financed by the European Commission called Media Freedom Rapid Response, and organizations that have contributed to the report monitoring press and media freedom violations in Europe are ECPMF, the European Federation of Journalists, and the International Press Institute. In this very short contribution, I'm only going to focus at the intersection of digital rights and press freedom violations that we've seen in the region of Southeastern Europe or the Balkan region. But in total, the report has covered 35 European countries with a specific focus on 6 EU countries and 6 candidate countries. And we've also zoomed in on 3 themes that we found particularly concerning for press freedom in Europe last year, which is reporting on elections, reporting on environmental and climate issues, and spoofing. In total, we found 1,548 violations if we're looking at the whole data set of press freedom violations. But if you're more interested in the details, you can find the report. Yeah, someone just posted it in the comments, I think, but on mappingmediafreedom.org. A special thanks at this point to my colleagues from EFJ and IPI who have monitored this region last year. I'm just presenting the findings here today, but if we're looking at press freedom violations in the following countries: Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, Hungary, Turkey, Serbia, Romania, North Macedonia, Montenegro, and Kosovo, we found 417 cases with 756 people affected. And while we tried to discourage rankings, we found most cases in Turkey, Serbia, and Hungary. Most online and digital attacks are the most common attacks of press freedom. As you've just heard, digital rights also heavily affect media workers and journalists, so we also have this reflected in our data, followed by instances at court or at demonstration in the Balkan region. If we look at press freedom in the Balkans in the digital space, there are 3 main themes. So we have verbal attacks, which are amongst the most common. It's about 50% of all the online and digital attacks we see. This includes intimidation and threats, bullying, harassment, and is one of the major issues, mainly they're perpetrated by private individuals, but which is also a big problem is that it's just very hard to trace them back to certain perpetrators. So there's a lot of impunity with digital verbal threats or attacks against journalists. We've seen a lot of these cases in Serbia, where also a lot of these cases were death threats, and they tend to target specific media outlets, but also individuals over and over and over again. A second issue we see is smear campaigns online, especially, and we see a trend and increase in this by legislation or politicians or government representatives. So this is mainly a public defaming against journalists online, on X, on Facebook, etc. We've also connected this to the general high stakes that are tied to elections, with a lot of the elections happening in the super election year 2024. And then a third issue of concern is hacking or distributed denial of service attacks, DDoS attacks. It basically describes an attack where the website of a media outlet is targeted by hundreds, thousands, millions of access requests at once, and this can shut down the website or slow it down for a significant amount of time, sometimes even for days or weeks, and it comes at a very, very high cost for media outlets. In all of the cases we registered for 2024, we don't know the perpetrators, so again, a very high level of impunity. And again, they tend to target the same media outlets, mostly independent media outlets. At once, Hungary was especially affected last year. We registered about half of the cases there. So in sum, if we look at press freedom and digital attacks in the Balkans, it remains a really big challenge. And especially we see verbal attacks, we see smear campaigns by political elites against journalists and media, and then also hacking attacks remain a very prominent issue. For more details, please, if you have the time or if you haven't done so, have a look at the report, and I'm excited for your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you both for sharing these valuable insights. Just for all attendees, note if you have questions for Ivana or Kara, please feel free to write your questions in the chat or using Q&A option. We are now moving forward to our next focus session on state of digital rights in targeted countries. The moderator of this session is Hamdi Firat Boyuk, Turkey correspondent at Balkan Insight and also BIRN's digital rights monitor for Turkey. Firat, I would just kindly ask you to present your speakers for this session before you start with the specific questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina. As Amina introduced, I am Hamdi Firat Büyük. So I will be today's moderator for this panel, and we have wonderful speakers. First, we have Gürkan Öztürk from ECPMF. Gürkan has been covering rights and press violations for many years, both for ECPMF, and he has been covering online violations for Freedom House as well. We have Mila Bajic from Serbia, from Share Foundation. Share Foundation based in Belgrade, Serbia, also covering internet and digital freedoms in Serbia and also in the region. We have Đurđa Radulović. She's from Montenegro and she's working for BIRN. She is our country monitor for our digital rights program. And similarly, we have Bojan Stojkovski from North Macedonia. He's also working for BIRN as the same capacity with Đurđa. So welcome everyone. We have only 25 minutes and we have 4 speakers. So that's why I kindly ask you to limit your speeches to 3 minutes or 4, the maximum. As we discussed, so I kindly ask you to speak about general overview of rights violations in your country, main challenges, and also you can share some of your findings, examples from BIRN's annual report, digital rights annual report. For Mila and Gürkan, you can also share your own findings. And at the end of your speeches, I am planning to ask a few questions to you. And I encourage all the participants to pose their questions. Please use Zoom's Q&A option. We can get your questions at the end of this panel or at the end of the event. So please, Gürkan, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Fırat. I will be trying to keep it brief. So, according to the latest Freedom on the Net report, Turkey remains still not free in the digital space with continuous restrictions on press and media in the field of freedom of expression, access to information, and digital privacy. There is a 1-point improvement in Turkey's score compared to the year before, in fact, in the field of infrastructure investments. However, in the field of fundamental rights and digital rights, the deterioration continued. And what we have seen in the aftermath of the publication of the report in Turkey, this has intensified in recent months, in fact. A stark example is the ongoing access issues in cities affected by the February 2023 earthquakes, which is still a major issue, and it is highlighting the inequality in digital connectivity. Censorship, surveillance, legal harassment of the journalists, activists, and opposition voices persist, and this creates a chilling effect on society and online discourse. The main challenges in the country are in a few subheadings concerning legal tools, the social media repression and election-related digital suppression, as well as surveillance and VPN bans. In the reporting period, 17 VPN service providers were blocked without a court order and demonstrating an arbitrary restriction on secure internet access. And during the election periods in 2023 and 2024, independent media sites faced widespread access bans, social media platforms faced pressure to remove opposition content, and press advertisement agency introduced new regulations to track visitor traffic, leading to potential cutting of funding for independent media organizations. And all major digital platforms in this period have bowed down to Turkey's repressive laws by opening legal offices. And Twitter was one of the remaining platforms to not open a local office in Turkey. However, with Elon Musk takeover, this has quickly changed. And especially in recent days, we have seen that multiple journalist accounts have been blocked by Twitter or by X in Turkey, and that the local offices are cooperating with the government requests right now. And in the field of legal tools, the disinformation law was passed a year and a half ago, which has been widely used to target journalists, with 41 journalists being investigated, 10 detained, 15 prosecuted in the first 18 months of the passing of this law. And in an absurd legal move in February 2024, a prosecutor requested an investigation into whether the followers of the former head of Diyarbakir Bar Association were terrorists. This was the most absurd development of the year, perhaps. If we give some other examples, some outstanding examples would be one judge issuing 10 content removal orders targeting journalist Timur Soykan's investigative article concerning the corruption allegations in the judiciary that were reflected in 741 news articles in 161 different media outlets. These all were removed by the order of one single judge. In other examples, we have seen that access blocking orders have targeted content that was published as far back as 1998. And investigative journalist Metin Cihan has faced multiple court cases during this period as well, after revealing the ongoing economic ties between the Turkish government and Israel. Aside from that, the digital crackdown on the LGBTI has continued in this process. The Turkey's media watchdog Rütük has fined online platforms for hosting LGBTI content, citing violations of Turkish family values. And aside from that, when we look at the process of the judicial action, 10 Kurdish politicians, including the former co-chairs of the People's Democratic Party, Selahattin Demirtas and Figen Yüksekdağ, were sentenced to up to 42 years in prison for their social media posts about Kobani in 2014. Turkey sets a negative example globally, and unfortunately in the field of digital repression, in Freedom House's Freedom on the Net Index, Turkey stands just above United Arab Emirates, Venezuela, and partly only slightly lower than Rwanda, Kazakhstan, and Azerbaijan. And to conclude, Turkey needs to go through a major change in the field of developing digital rights field to create a new digital atmosphere based on people-centered, multi-stakeholder approach. And without these changes, it will continue to set a dangerous precedent for digital repression worldwide. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Gürkan. Before going to our next speaker, I would like to ask a question to you. So, I mean, nothing has happened in a day in Turkey. So actually, it was a result of years-long legislation changes and political changes in the country. So you already mentioned the legislation changes in recent years in Turkey, but could you please give some most recent examples, especially this new cybersecurity law, how these legal changes are being made and how they are targeting freedom of speech, journalists and citizens alike?
The first person to be subjected to some kind of violation for their online activity in Turkey was in 1997. And the first legislative attempt came in 2001. And the first law directly regulating the online space in Turkey was introduced in 2007 as 5651. Since then, this law has gone through multiple amendments, each time deepening and expanding its influence and targeting more and more people, while authorizing state bodies and government officials with more authority to target independent content or criticism. These laws have always been prepared in the dark without consultation to the civil society or necessary sector professionals or people who would be impacted by them. And some of the most recent examples would be the disinformation law that was passed 2 years ago, and then the civil society law that was from 4 years ago. But also at the moment, we are discussing two different laws. Teona will mention later on the foreign agent laws, which is also reflected in Turkey as an amendment to the Espionage Act. And another case would be the digital security law, which is now creating yet another layer of repression, a legal form of repression that would enable targeting of independent voices in the country for the sake of protection of national security. While these laws are being drafted in the dark and the society is kept out of the discussion, we are presented with the voting at the Turkish Parliament, usually around 4 a.m., where the government representatives are passing the law hastily without leading to any kind of public discussion or any kind of internalization of the law. And years later, when these laws or articles are even being removed, people are unaware what has taken place in the legal side, because everything happens too fast, even though it doesn't happen overnight. Over the course of years, each step is taken hastily without letting people understand what is going on. And in this process, the democratization is severely harmed. And as a result, now we are seeing a digital rights field that is extremely harsh towards its netizens.
Thank you, Gürkan. It was a very nice speech and very informative about the legal changes. So our next country is Serbia. Mila Bajic from Share Foundation will explain us what happened in the past year and what is the current digital rights situation in the country. Mila.
Yeah, thank you, Firat. I hope everybody can hear me. I think Ivana and Kara already did a good job kind of doing an overview of what the state of digital rights is. So I'll just touch upon two other aspects. So the first one, I would like to mention the Freedom of the House report for Serbia, which was the fourth one in the row that we did. In 2024, Serbia fell down to 70 points, which is basically the line between partly free and free, which is the lowest score the country has gotten. Unfortunately, we're not sure if we're going to be doing the 2025 report, given everything that's going on globally. But I would say that my predictions were definitely that we would be falling under the partly free or under the free line, and we would be chartering into partly free territory. What is quite interesting is that the majority of the points that Serbia does lose in the Freedom of the Net report are almost exclusively concerning limits on content and violating users' rights. So there is no obstacles to access, more or less. There's no infrastructural issues in Serbia that kind of something that we would probably see, I think, in Turkey, which would be like limiting internet and these kind of repressive draconian laws. This is something that's not still happening in Serbia. And I wouldn't say that's because I wouldn't give it a good faith argument. I would definitely say that this is something that's just still not being kind of overlooked. It's still being overlooked by the government, and this is why we're not kind of in the front lines when it comes to this kind of legislation. On the other hand, Share Foundation has been conducting digital rights violation monitoring for the past 10 years, and 2024 did mark the 10th year. So we're on the way to publish our 10-year report. And some of the main things that we did find kind of brought us to the situation at which we are today, which I'll also touch upon, are kind of this information disorder that has been intensifying in the past 10 years. And one of the main things that we've seen through that disorder is, for instance, how the media environment is currently set up. So the majority of people are still very much heavily leaning towards traditional news. And when we say traditional, so we mean either kind of print press or television news. And in these instances, either these media are being transferred onto their online versions, so the portals, which people then follow for most of their information, but these are more or less copy pasted versions of traditional media outlets that we already have in this country. And on the other hand, we have social media, which is kind of increasing in popularity and has been increasing in the past couple of years. What we did see, especially when we were doing the monitoring of the election process in late 2023, is that there's a completely parallel media structure that has been set up to kind of disinform the public. And the majority of this is not even providing information to people, but rather kind of providing this parallel structure of what is going on within the country, which is obviously in the majority of the cases, it's kind of inaccurate and false. Another thing that I would mention, and I think this is something that we will come back to, obviously, is that all of these factors kind of influenced what is going on right now with the protests, and just not to be completely kind of negative, I would just say that what we are seeing is some kind of digital resurgence with the students and with citizens and netizens, and how they're using social media and how they're using the internet to organize and to fight back and to kind of showcase the digital resilience that does exist within the community. And I think it would be kind of paramount to focus on this at this specific point. So I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mila. Actually, I was about to ask this ongoing protests in Serbia against the government. I mean, what kind of digital rights violations you observed during the protests, especially coming from the government and ruling party?
So, yeah, one of the main things that we do see, and one of the main things that this government does participate in, is something that we would call exclusion. And the exclusion is usually brought on in a couple of ways. So there's a lot of data protection violations. So we get a lot of people being, I mean, proverbially, we could say it's some kind of doxing, right? So it goes through online media. We had a situation where two students had their passport photos released into the media. We have situations of private information of students being released, private photos. We've had situations where some activists' photos from surveillance cameras at the airports were being used in the media. We do find that this online media, these portals, are kind of the main hub for generating these violations. And yeah, no, I said regular, I mean, doxing as is. I would just say it was the kind of doxing, we don't have a specific name for it, but doxing in relation to how this information is being used through online media. And another thing that I think is important to mention is that the other types of violations that we see, so all of them are aimed at this exclusion. There's a lot of disinformation being shared. There's a lot of it going through social media, but there's also a lot of it going through these online media portals. But I do think, on the other hand, we do see this other side also kind of fighting back in this digital environment. So a lot of people are trying to reclaim this space, either by also sharing information that would kind of help people to know what is going on. It would help people to know which protests are going on, when the protests are going on, where they're going on. We have various Viber groups, since we know that the older populations usually tend to kind of congregate around Viber. They're not using social media such as X or even Instagram. They actually kind of organize their protests on Viber, and this is how it's being distributed. So I think it's kind of a nice balance between the two, even though the government is really aiming to kind of silence as much as they can. And I think I would just add, so there is a quite specific difference between what they're doing outside of social media, which is obviously, as we all know, using spyware and kind of surveillance tactics that are that have been also seen around the world, and that are being unfortunately sponsored by grants that are being given by other countries, by other embassies. And unfortunately, even though all of this information is now available and we've done a lot of research on it, right, and everybody's talking about it, the state is still, or more should I say, the government is kind of turning a blind eye. They're pretending this is not something that they're engaging in.
Mhm. Thank you very much, Mila. Next, we have Đurđa Radulović from Montenegro. She's working with BIRN. Đurđa, please share your findings from BIRN's digital rights violations annual report. Thank you.
Hello, Hamdi. So during the last year, there were several types of digital violations. We concluded that Montenegro still huge issues with cyber security and cyber and digital infrastructure. It remains a big challenge since 2022, when a huge cyber attack permanently damaged the whole digital system in many Montenegrin institutions. Now, during this last year, we've seen that these attacks actually repeated in several institutions, and at the time of these attacks, it was not public information. So we get to find, for example, that there was one attack on Montenegro Statistics Office in November. We find out about that just in January, and we still don't know, for example, what is the scope of this attack. Also, what is the scale of this attack? What informations were destroyed? What informations are kept? Also, there was one attack on water supply also during last year that BIRN reported. Also, it was really not reported a lot. There was not a lot, many public information on that case. When it comes to the biggest case that happened in 2022, we still don't know who was behind that, whether this was like terrorist group from Russia, like it was spoke about before, whether it was something from Montenegro. It was some sort of hacking attack coming from Montenegro, maybe from previous system, because as you probably know, there was a big governmental change in Montenegro in 2020. And there is still a huge assumption that the previous system led by Democratic Party of Socialists was heavily corrupted, and that it was a system that lasted for 30 years. So there's a lot of information. There are a lot of information kept in that system that are now tractable after this attack in 2022. So we still, although, for example, USA Embassy of USA was also trying to help us. FBI, Europe, leading experts in the field from Europe, European Union, nothing happened, and we still don't have information. And that remains definitely the biggest issue in Montenegro, together with legislation that improved a bit during the last year, let's say. Some new acts. Some new changes in law happened at the end of 2023, and they were starting being implemented during the last year. Let me see. For example, we had these changes for laws regarding so-called revenge pornography, and now we have really way more stricter punishment for those cases, and this law is being implemented. During last several months, we witnessed increasing pressures toward journalists and toward protesters, because as well as in Serbia, we have some kind of protests and public outrage in Montenegro, also led by students, I believe partly inspired by what is going on in Serbia. We've seen huge pressures on journalists. There was an attack on investigative journalist Ana Raičković, who intensively wrote about shady businesses of Montenegrin businessman Zoran Bećirović. He personally attacked her physically, and he damaged her car together with his son and their security guard. Then reporter of investigative online portal Libertas was also verbally attacked several days ago. Libertas is leading investigative media in Montenegro. They're maybe the only one media that is dealing with mafia connections with the former and current regime, which is really important contribution in societies such as Montenegro. So also, Montenegro witnessed several public events that caused public outrage and these protests. And one was the case from January when mass murder happened in small town of Montenegro. This mass murder was really a response to this mass murder from authorities was really slow, was really terribly unorganized, and the protesters started asking for resignations of high officials, including Minister of Interior and Deputy Prime Minister of Security and Defense. Both of them belong to the same party. On their official page, this party started targeting protesters. Then also President of Parliament, Andrija Mandić, also targeted some of the protesters in December when the case of sexual harassment in one school shook the state. He targeted these protesters because the principal of that school is also involved with politics, is also connected to the one of the parties which is in the government. So as we can see, although as a colleague from Serbia, Mila, said, we don't have this, for example, internet and Wi-Fi usurpations on protests, but we have open attacks on protesters that are going online and directly from the people who are on from the highest officials, from the people from the government, which itself is really sign of danger.
Thank you very much, Georgia. I was planning to ask you the government's response and lack of institutional capacity in Montenegro, but you already answered my question. So I would like to go to Boyan.
Okay,
Boyan, please tell us what is happening in North Macedonia.
Thanks, Hamdi, for the introduction. Thanks everybody for participating in this webinar. I mean, with most of you, we have been working on this digital rights violation report. So I would say that things in Macedonia are relatively similar to what is going on in other countries from the region as well, with minor changes, of course. I would say that last year report, during the period that we monitored, we registered 366 cases of digital rights violations, but I would say that there are a lot more. These were only the ones that we managed in our capacity to have it in our database. The main trends included online hate speech. I think that this is the far biggest category that we have seen in the country. For last year report, it's also one of those categories that has been sort of repeating in other years as well. It only depends on the number of cases. I think that this year we had maybe the highest number if we compare it to previous years. And when we talk about online hate speech, here is, I think, basically everybody is targeted. You can when we talk about ethnic minorities, religious minorities, gender-based violence, I think we have probably seen everything in North Macedonia. As for the perpetrators, I would say that last year also saw a large number of perpetrators actually coming from political parties, politicians. I think since Donald Trump won in the US, most politicians here are also using that type of rhetorics, and sort of, I think Ivan Jeremic mentioned, it's like turning nonsense into facts. We have seen this all the time. It's really popular on different social media networks, I would say, and it's only getting worse if we compare it to previous years. This type of rhetorics. One thing that has stood out, I think, if we compare to other countries, is we had that trend of online scams. So online scams, frauds, different types of campaigns that are out there. I think last year was definitely a boom, let's say, in that type of activities. Together with the use of AI, I think that AI and different AI related tools are actually being used to disseminate and increase this type of campaigns. This also speaks about the lack of digital literacy. Unfortunately, I think this is also something that not only in North Macedonia, but I think we have seen this throughout the whole region. This is becoming one dangerous trend that where citizens are really being scammed and their data, their privacy, everything is sort of being out there, and the government, unfortunately, isn't yet ready to deal with this type of issues on a larger scale. And I think my predictions are that we are going to see a lot more of this in this year as well, especially like I mentioned before with the rise of AI. So I would say that these are those main trends that we have seen this year, North Macedonia. So, and I would say that much of these trends are also going to be present in the rest of the region as well.
Boyan, thank you very much. So, I mean, as you explained, the Balkan countries lack enough institutional capacities and political willingness to counter these digital threats. Could you please elaborate more about the government's response to these digital rights violations, especially in regards to cybersecurity and TikTok and its influence in your country?
Yes, I mean, like the example that was present in Albania, I believe, we also had a kind of a debate about the use of TikTok, its influence on teenagers in the country. But I think that the government here didn't really decide to handle this with a ban, but they said that they would have like sort of educational campaigns in which teens and their parents are also educated in how to actually use the networks and how to use tools that could limit the bad effects of those activities. As to cybersecurity, I mean, North Macedonia, unfortunately, is one of the countries that still lacks a cybersecurity law. Authorities this year, I think, did manage to have a draft, but this is yet to pass in the parliament. And yes, there is some type of progress here, let's say, but same like the case in Montenegro, I think the past 2 years we were also like our institutions were also hit with lots of different cyber attacks. So this only exposed how vulnerable are our institutions. So a lot more needs to be done here as well.
Thank you very much, Boyan. So actually, this is the end of our session. We have some questions, and we would like to pose those questions to our speakers, but we will do this at the end of the event. So now this session is officially ended. Amina can continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Firat, and thank you all for these specific insights for each country. As you mentioned, we will take all the questions at the end. Also, for all of you who want to share insights from your countries that are not mentioned during this focus session, please add them in the chat. We would like to have this discussion around what is happening in the region. Now I will hand it over to Aida Mahmutovic, Project Manager of Reporting Digital Rights and Freedoms Project at BIRN Kosovo, who will moderate our panel discussion on big tech influence on internet freedom. So Aida, over to you.
Thank you, Amina, and thank you everyone who spoke so far. Really, apart from the information that we knew, we always hear something new and appalling, obviously, with everything that's happening around the world. It is my big pleasure to have these two panelists during the Big Tech and Influence on Internet Freedom session. These are Feja Kulenovic, who is a senior assistant at the Department of Comparative Literature and Information Sciences at the University of Sarajevo, and Bojana Kostic, digital rights and media specialists. I would like to start with Feja Kulenovic. Basically, during this rapid session, we will take a look into the influence of big tech companies on the internet freedom. And only a few years back, we were able to witness high-stake battles between states, governments, and technology companies on different sides. But indeed, always internet rights users as well as media freedom obviously were the main casualties. Now, this part didn't change, but what we see now is that tech companies, especially big tech companies and governments, are working hand in hand. Feja, can you please tell us a little bit more? What role do you see major companies like Meta, TikTok, and X, especially lately, are playing in these processes, and especially when it comes to media and digital rights freedoms?
Thank you, Aida. I would say that they don't play the role. They're trying to evade the roles and are using the opportunity with the current change of the administration to remove themselves from any responsibility in that sense. So it's just a question of them being focused on the bottom line and earning money and not being responsible for the actions of that happen on the part of the network that they control and own and basically earn money from. So in that sense, I would say that it seems like they are going right wing, but it's mostly that they're going account wing in a sense, and using the opportunity of at least in case of Meta, using this opportunity to say, okay, we don't have to do this and we will abandon this. Just today, I mean, it's really irrelevant on one aspect of what we're talking about, but it's also about digital rights in a sense of preservation of information, that they will stop, that Meta will stop storing live streams that are older more than 30 days. Which is also a change in a policy that could affect us in the future. You can still download it, but only if you own it. So if we have similar cases like the one case of femicide that happened, not only one, unfortunately, but the most prominent one that happened online in these past couple of years, we would lose the access to this video as an evidence in the future. So this is one small example how they're trying to backtrack from everything that has been done so far under the pressure of, in this case, U.S. government, to do something about the issues that are going on. And I predict that they will probably be even more relaxed in this case. And particularly my concern in these past couple of years were journalists. There are really, on one side, issues of digital literacy that we mentioned. So even the basic protections of the accounts are sometimes not in place. But even when you have them in place, somehow, I mean, through phishing attacks and so on, someone gains the access to your accounts or through similar cybersecurity breaches, and it's really hard to get to someone in Meta or anywhere else. I won't even talk about X to actually get these accounts to their rightful owners, and usually we still have to use back channels and so on, which is really weird. So I would say that I'm not optimistic in that sense, particularly in terms of X, which is a different case from what I was talking about Meta, where we obviously have a person participating in a political campaign and threatening to affect the disloyal members of Congress through funneling a lot of money. The only hope I have is that he will lose a lot of money, so he will stop doing this. But I'm not sure.
Just a quick follow-up question, because I know you have to leave very, very soon. And thank you for joining. Since you've been collaborating with Meta through the escalation channel, like, do you see nowadays with all these global changes, especially coming from the US, do you see any differences in terms of the Balkans region?
No, for one reason only, and that is because it's not because of Meta, but because I did this mostly through a USAID funded project, which ended abruptly, as we all know. But we still have contacts with the media, and as far as I can see, they don't have any issues in terms of the cybersecurity breaches like in the past year. So, and it's early in the year, so I'm hoping they won't have the issue. But my main concern is that the back channel that I have been using could actually dry out, because Meta is also actively dismissing a lot of staff, and a lot of staff is also very dismissive about Meta's new policies. So the question is whether the people I reach out to will stay in their current function, whether they decide to leave because of their ethical sense of duty, or because Meta decides that they are no longer necessary. I can see that basically there are a lot of unanswered questions in terms of the organized networks that are disseminating either misinformation, disinformation, or any type of false information and introducing information disorder on Meta. And my concern is that journalists will be silenced even more, and media on all of these networks, just like in the case that was also already mentioned in case of the Srebrenica commemoration last year, which is the example of how you should not automate any type of content moderation. Because most obviously this was not related to Srebrenica directly, but because of the events in Palestine, and the I guess Meta's again really false policy of preventing anyone mentioning the word genocide, which goes in contradiction with some of the executive orders that we have seen, but I will not get into that.
Thank you so much, Feja. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, and I'm sorry I can't stay longer. But
thank you. We'll be in touch for sure. If anyone has a question, we'll make sure to forward it to Feja, and we'll ask him kindly to maybe provide his feedback. As I said, these days what we're witnessing is free expression online being under unprecedented strain. Governments hand in hand with big tech companies are jointly forcing shrinking free online spaces, whether through online censorship, while actually saying they are fighting for against it, whether it's surveillance, overall opening digital space back to hate speech, hateful narratives, disinformation, and especially toward the most vulnerable communities like LGBTIQ, women, and similar. To quote Guardian's techscape, Blake Montgomery, who said about Elon Musk, the biggest tech story of the year is Elon Musk's rise to the omnipresence and on unprecedented level of global power. In 2024, he managed to become the world's most influential unelected man. He has the ear of the President of the United States and influence over the very agencies that would rein his companies. Those companies have become vital to the digital infrastructure of many nations. His pursuit makes US lawmakers genuflect or cower. His tweets make leaders around the world cheer or fly into a rage. I would like to hear from our Bojana Kostic, who is for so many years now digital rights and media specialist and researcher. Bojana, can you compare your work to years back when you were researching and writing, publishing about digital rights, and today? How do you see this balancing on corporate powers with user rights, on issues of privacy, censorship, etc.? Can you provide us with some?
Sure. Hi, Dr. Dan from me too. Lovely to be here, and thanks for having me. I mean, I would just go back like a decade ago when we started looking at the digital rights space into algorithms and stuff. We, even to ourselves, it sounds like we're looking into something that's like invisible and it's not, it's neutral or whatever. We had all of our ideas on what this might be. I remember I did a seminar at a University of Amsterdam here in 2016, which was about this Google AI system that actually was checking whether there was a hate speech or not, and then it was given some percentages. And I remember looking into the literature. There was really not so much about it, you know. And then few years forward, and then everyone is speaking about algorithms and transparency for whom and transparency about what. But at that point still on, we don't actually know how we should hold the companies accountable. And then the mechanisms of accountability starting showing up, right? So we had the Santa Clara principles and oversight boards, and the GNI did quite a lot of work. I'm definitely missing a lot of efforts of so many colleagues that were working in this field. Yeah, like whether we expected that something big will come out, for sure we did, but we were equally aware of the kind of inequality as first of information asymmetry, because we were expecting accountability regulation in the dark, like what are you regulating if you don't know what's behind it? But then we were able to see, like after Myanmar, after so many events around the world where Mark Zuckerberg had to show up in the elections, right, in the Congress and so on, that the things were kind of changing the direction. And 24, we were like, oh my God, now the states are going to have the kind of the lead on saying what shall and how it shall be regulated, meaning like how the platforms be regulated, and the DSA then was adopted and so on. So what we were seeing is like literally like from the day of like when we kind of started figuring out, there are these big automated infrastructure systems, they have some affordances, they allow us to see certain things are done, right? To the day of 2025, almost like less than 10 years, we see the complete shift, and for the lead in terms of like how we regulate. So for the legal sense and for the legal frameworks, the normative frameworks, this is a huge shift, right? So the laws are rather kind of a more slow, that we like to kind of take things a bit more easier. And especially when you think about freedom of expression, and to answer your question, I'm not really perplexed as I thought I would be, because I kind of always felt that this incredible power asymmetry will not play out well at the end to the detriment of freedom of expression and other human rights and all the citizens' well-beings. So in that sense, what I think is going to be the kind of a before and after kind of effect for now on, at least in some kind of a short-term period, is like people adjusting and learning what is possible and what is not possible. And then, as always, as Vale taught us, you know, like practice hope. So I really think that, you know, there will be a moment where, as an adaptable, smart, intelligent, and emotional humans, we will find a way to live through it within the cracks. The only thing is actually, and that's what I'm struggling to foresee, because there is not much coming out of Europe, and I'm not sitting in the middle of Brussels, so to be able to kind of touch and feel it if I don't have the right information right in front of me, just to be able to kind of anticipate what will be the moves of the European Commission and this whole EU regulatory framework. This, I think, will be very important also for the Western Balkans. And I hope I answered your question, because there is no one answer to this, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. No, you did. What I wanted to check more, because I believe that after the US election, the biggest kind of a boom related to digital space was the fact-checking, the removal of fact-checkers and in terms of content moderation. What is there to tell us? Like, do we know more now about what's going to happen? Because they put these this sort of a deadline on a year, and then they would expand from the US to, let's say, the rest of the world.
Yeah, that's a good question.
How would, sorry, just quickly, how would this impact us in the Western Balkans because we are somehow in the middle, we're trying to move towards the EU, but the regulation is not for the European Union. So where do we stand?
Yeah, so basically, I really enjoyed and immersed into the moment of the protests in Serbia, because what they really showed us over and over again is that the change will come from us and not from the European Union. So you can have any DSA, like a mega regulator with all the independency check boxes. If they are not properly functioning within the system, then they're pretty much useless. And I mean, it's good that that we could be a part of the European Union, but if it's not working, then it's not good, right? If it's not protecting human rights. So to answer your question about the changes that Mark Zuckerberg made, they are just basically following the path of the changes that X and Elon Musk made, which are bizarre. There are like texts online where you can read actually how he was putting like all of his best programmers to sit together in a room and make his posts more visible, just because some of the posts were more visible and more clicked. The posts from Joe Biden, for example. I mean, completely like a Monty Python. I don't even, I can't even stop panicking about it. So it's so ridiculous. In any case, Mark Zuckerberg's fact-checking program, yes, it's a big, huge deal, and we'll see what's going to happen. Again, there are these kind of a regulatory, I mean, hopefully there are still this European Union regulatory buffers that we can kind of hope to kind of a guinea pig for a short while. And plus, there are like fact-checking systems that don't only work as a third-party meta fact-checkers, that also work independently, and they have their own kind of ways to to glitch the system, in a sense of makes a certain content that contains misinformation, whatever, less visible. Though I have a lot of things to say about that too, right? So but more concerning for me was this whole aspect of the content moderation and hate speech, for 3 reasons. I don't know if you saw this Intercept leaked document on the new hate speech policies. It's literally like the fascist manifesto. And it's really scary because it's absolutely unclear. I mean, it was previously unclear how and what was taken down, but now it's even more, right? And it's very kind of arbitrary, pretty dehumanizing and horrible. And then the two other aspects is that this new idea of spreading the entire content that they might deem hate speech into like lesser, more severe. And then like, what are the criteria kind of supposed to be clear from reading these new guidelines, which is absolutely unclear. And then the kind of the most risky parts for me there is that you need to have certain level of credibility as a user to request the removal of a content that you deem to be hate speech. What this kind of a level of credibility or the scale of credibility looks like, I mean, again, I wrote a piece recently, really reminds me of this Chinese social scoring system, right? So you need to be scored in some way. So that said, I'm honestly waiting for this big global move to move away from the platforms. I'm seeing it here in the Netherlands, like 500,000 people left X. So whether that's gonna be like that won't kind of threaten their wealth, for sure. Like there is nothing we can do about that. But like in our individual agencies that we still have, I think we should use it wisely, because these are not the times where we can basically sit on the same footing. Unfortunately, the countries like Germany, Italy, wherever, might want to have some reasonable conversation with these tech oligarchs, but we are not there. So we need to kind of rely on what we have.
Thank you, Bojana. While I heard you speak, I really wanted to end this really short rapid fire sort of session on a positive note. However, I will end it with the information that both Amina and I did our best to invite representatives by big tech companies, including, for example, TikTok, who is trying to get into the region with their escalation channels and similar. Unfortunately, and this is not the first time, we were not that lucky to host them. However, through the Reporting Digital Rights and Freedoms project, we do intend more face-to-face and online meetings, and we will do our best to bring them to the table. And we always communicate to them that the idea is not to have them that we are here on a sort of attack mode, but rather to understand and you know, really jointly kind of try to fix some things. So Bojana, thank you so much. Thank you, Feja. Over to you, Amina.
Thank you.
Thank you all for sharing your insights, and thank you, Ada. I really think that your last question on fact-checking program is really good introduction to our final session for today's webinar. How really these trends mentioned today, including also removing meta fact checks program, are affecting media freedoms. So Gurkan, please go ahead and yeah, let's start with this latest session of today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amina. And I will now be presenting the final session of today on media freedom at a larger region. And in this session, we will be welcoming Camille Magnisalis from European Federation of Journalists, the Media Freedom Monitoring Officer, Theonos Ekniashvili, International Press Institute's Europe Network and Advocacy Officer, and Azam Kurtic from BIRN, Bosnia and Herzegovina correspondent. Welcome, all of you. And I would like to first start with Camille and ask about spoofing in Europe. Camille, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gurkan, and to everyone. Yes, spoofing was indeed a topic of high interest this year, ranging from deepfake, AI, manipulated content, and cyber squatting. Before diving into the different trends, I would like to say that when I joined the EFJ and the MFR team a year ago, I expected to deal with serious cases and death threats, but I was really not thinking that one of the most threatening cases would be related to spoofing. I'm thinking about, there's many examples, but at this time it was the journalist, and it is unfortunately, Dinko Vranic in Serbia, who was exposed in a fake manipulated video in which he was falsely expressing satisfaction at sharing a name with a criminal, Dinko Sakric, and this video was shared on pro-Russian Telegram channel and widely spread on social media, used by politics also as rhetoric, including the president, to portray him as a political opponent and to endanger his life and to silence his work. Of course, he's not the only one targeted, but what I want to say here is that from the fake video, Dinko was so much and still unfortunately threatened to death that the MFR had to intervene with exceptional measures, and the threats escalate beyond the screen because he was even threatened at his home. So what I want to say here is that when monitoring the instances, it's also important to keep in mind that the digital threats can really go beyond the screen and impact the life and the security of the journalist. This year, the rise, we really monitored also the rise of AI facilitating deepfakes, disinformation, and most of the perpetrators, I have to say that they remain unidentified. It's really hard to identify them. In the EU member states, I would say that deepfakes that we monitored this year, concern a lot of fraudulent advertisements. So you had journalists being targeted in fake stories. So when you click on it, you lure people, internet users, to fraudulent platforms, scams, and it really discredits the media and the journalist credibility, but as well, of course, it infringes your right to access qualitative and accurate information. One notable example was, for example, in Denmark, in January, so last year, when you had this dear Radio Anderlundsmadsen, who appeared in the Facebook newsfeed, so in fake stories, over than 500 times in only 8 days. So those cases also really highlight the challenges on Meta and high-tech platforms to remove the post, to take responsibility, and also the tools that need to be designed and developed to counter the proliferation of those fake and dangerous contents. The Russian propaganda is really on the rise. In France, for example, the international broadcaster, France 24, I was actually working for before, was really targeted ahead of the International Olympic Games with fake stories, really to create the chaos and to spread fears and, for example, announcing risk of terrorism attacks. The second type of spoofing attacks, we were really focused on it for the really first part, like the second part of the year, sorry. It's cyber squatting. So my colleague introduced it a bit at the beginning, but what is cyber squatting? So you mimic legitimate websites. So you want to create like fake websites that really look like legitimate news websites, so on which you can spread disinformation, propaganda, and it was really like a roaring trend this year because you have some internet domain, so that the people or organization are buying, so with similar designs and names, but you will have sometimes 1, 2, 3, a few different letters in the domain addresses. So you really need to be careful because sometimes you can really think that it's a legitimate website, and unfortunately you will you will be lured to disinformation and propaganda. This cyber squatting is also really used as an element of smear campaign. For example, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, there was this cloned website imitating the Coalition for Free and Fair Election, accusing Radio Kadjina of being financed by the husband of HDZ candidate for mayor of Kadjina. So to discredit completely the media outlet and its fundings. And the article was published in the run-up of the local elections. So it really shows how those fake websites can be used to spread disinformation in support of political agenda. So it's we need to be extra careful, and journalists and media outlets are not the only one targeted. If you take the example of the Media Freedom Organization, Reporters Without Borders in France, in July, they discovered that they were really targeted with, it was a disinformation and a denigration campaign. So they discovered a fake RSF website, so really looking like RSF, and other 4 passive internet domains on which content, denigrating content on RSF was spread on it. Also, Twitter message ready to be posted, and content that was promoting at the time channels of the French media tycoon Vincent Bolloré in France. So they made an investigation and they found out that all this campaign was actually orchestrated by the Vivendi group, which belonged to Vincent Bolloré. So those tactics are also used to smear and for own political interest. And actually, RSF was also subject to smear campaign by pro-government Serbian media, government officials following investigation into RT Balkan's links to the Kremlin. So the Russian disinformation propaganda is on the rise also, and the MF for our team, and also the EFJ, thanks to our affiliates, also the Safe Journalist Network and all our members, we are really monitoring. So thanks a lot, because thanks to our strong cooperation, we are able to monitoring it to track. But it's a really hard time because it's really hard to identify So whenever we see a threat or a journalist see a threat, it's important to report because we need to keep advocating for a safe online environment and with the platforms to be responsible also for the removal of the content and to ensure that the users are able to access free information, free from propaganda and of course disinformation, especially at this time.
Thank you so much, Camille. And next will be on our agenda with the foreign agent laws. In Turkey also, there have been preparations since last year. The government has drafted a draft law on foreign influence agents in Turkey. And this was withdrawn 3 times so far, one time referring to Georgia last year. Turkey referred to Georgia as being anti-democratic if they passed this law, and then Turkey took it even further. They scaled it up a bit and then brought it into the Turkish parliament to withdraw it for rediscussion in the beginning of 2025. And we have not seen it yet, but in multiple other countries, Teona will give us now an overview of what is going on regarding foreign agent laws. Teona, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Gurkan. And so thank you for the introduction about Turkey. Before I dive into foreign agent laws, I just want to note that a veteran Georgian journalist who has been fighting against injustice and for press freedom for years and who launched 2 of the most prominent independent media outlets is now unjustly held in pre-detention. And pretrial detention, and my organization IPI has launched a petition-like statement, and we call for her release. I think we should all call for her release. So I'm sharing the statement, and please consider signing it. Shim Ziamaglobeli, the journalist who I'm talking about, she was also firstly fighting against the foreign agent laws in Georgia, both times in 2023 and in 2024, last April. Then the government, the Georgian Dream ruling party, introduced these laws. First time in 2023, they have withdrawn the law after it passed the first hearing, and this was basically the result of really widespread protests and international pressure and criticism. However, a year after they brought it back, basically the laws would require non-governmental organizations and newsrooms to register as organizations pursuing the interest of foreign power. And then, according to the latest amendments, they would also have to disclose any kind of confidential or private information if the Ministry of Justice asked for it. And the Ministry of Justice could start investigation into the activities of these organizations, basically quite arbitrarily. What happened in Georgia is that the law has not been implemented yet, but it was a clear sign of the upcoming unprecedented crackdown on media and non-governmental organizations. However, what is very important to note is that most of the prominent newsrooms and NGOs, they decided not to comply and not register as organizations pursuing the interests of foreign influence. Very recently, the Georgian Dream faction leader announced that they are going to replace the existing foreign agent law with a new one, with a stricter one. The proposal has not been tabled yet, but we are keeping a close eye on what is going to happen. Georgia, fortunately, is not the only case where foreign agent laws or similar legislation has been proposed. In Hungary, in December 2023, Fidesz adopted the Sovereignty Protection Act, basically virtually with no public consultation, just within 2 weeks. And it is noteworthy that media was not really explicitly mentioned in the draft legislation. It was not really clear how it would concern media organizations as such. And the text of the Sovereignty Protection Act was really vague. Based on this Sovereignty Protection Act, a new agency, Sovereignty Protection Authority, would be established. And a few months later, it was announced that the Sovereignty Sovereignty Protection Authority would start in an investigation into the activities of a few organizations, including the Transparency International Hungary and Adlatso, one of the most prominent independent investigative newsrooms in Hungary. A few months back, this authority did publish a report based on this quote-unquote investigation, basically labeling Adlatso as a spy. And saying that investigative journalism is nothing but intelligence gathering, and it just serves the interest of foreign countries. Fortunately, in Hungary, the Sovereignty Protection Authority lacks sanctioning power, unless in Georgia, where the newsrooms or NGOs which do not comply will face fines eventually. However, obviously, it goes without saying that the main purpose of the foreign agent law, in this case, Sovereignty Protection Act, is just to curtail, discredit independent voices, including those of newsrooms and the non-government organizations. The similar legislation was also proposed in Slovakia, where Robert Fico started his Prime Minister Robert Fico started his term claiming, or rather, I don't know, promising that he would end the NGO supremacy. And the law was tabled, it was proposed, it has not been adopted yet. And just in November, an ultra-nationalist party, SNS, which is part of the ruling coalition, suggested some changes, according to which NGOs would not be labeled as foreign-supported organizations, but as lobbyist organizations, but otherwise there won't be many changes. Again, the law has not been adopted yet. It also includes quite heavy fines, and we'll see. In any case, it also does not mention media, but we have seen already in the example of Hungary that just because these laws do not mention media doesn't mean that they do not concern media. And I think that my colleagues will speak a little bit more about other cases of foreign agent laws, like Gurkan already spoke about Turkey, but Republika Srpska also proposed a foreign agent law. It was withdrawn, I think it was in May, last May, but there are reports that it might come back, and you correct me later if I'm wrong, but this law the text is quite severe as well. The language is the same, very vague, but it all mentions that NGOs should be barred will be barred from political activities, which can mean many things, and needless to say is incredibly problematic. So one thing that we can also very clearly see is that illiberal or authoritarian regimes across Europe are weaponizing these laws to consolidate illiberalism or authoritarianism. And they are proposed in disguise of, enhancing transparency or protecting national sovereignty, or as Gurkan said, protecting national security, but all they serve is further scaling back of democratic freedoms and curtailing and basically killing journalism. And these laws often claim, in Georgia, they claimed that this was an American law because of FARA, but they are very much designed and tailored to very similar to the Russian style foreign agent law. Largely because of which there is virtually no independent journalism left in Russia. Then that's also something that we should be looking at. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teona, for this insightful presentation. And finally, we go to Sarajevo. Azem, the floor is yours. What is happening in Bosnia and the Balkans overall? And as Teona already broke the conversation towards the foreign agents laws, perhaps you would also like to mention a bit on this as well.
Yeah, hi, again, first of all, to everyone. Bosnia is a nightmare to trying to understand the legislation and trying to set them up. But the Republika Srpska officials, which is inside the country, we have a state level government. Then we have a lower level of the government, which are the entities in Brčko district. And then President of Republika Srpska, Milorad Dodik, has in 2023 proposed, he didn't propose, but he announced that the foreign agent law we dubbed it foreign agents law, but he calls it a law on special registry of non-governmental organizations, Basically, everybody who is receiving any kind of money from abroad will have to, in a matter of 15 days, to file the report on the money and the amount and where it came from to the Ministry of Justice of Republika Srpska. Then the National Assembly, prosecutions, the courts, and other entities, if the Ministry of Justice deems it that they deserve that information, can be shared. It also gives a lot of legal rights to the Minister of Justice to mark anyone who is receiving money from the abroad, to mark them as the agents of foreign influence, to issue procedures, and in the end they could be banned from existing or could be banned from actually working their activities. But that's not just one law. In mid-2023, the defamation went back into criminal procedures in Republika Srpska. So it's a set of laws that they're actually trying to enforce in order to take full control of what's being said and what's being published, in order to keep their influence over the politics and public goods that they have. So anybody criticizing the regime of Milorad Dodik can be marked as the agent of the foreign influence. When it comes to defamation, for example, the first draft that they proposed even included prison sentences and money fines or financial fines of up to 25,000 euros. Now, in the adopted law, they reduced it to up to 2,000 euros, I think, something like that. But it says that you have to pay it in a matter of a month, and if you cannot pay it in a matter of the month, then you have to serve each of the days, where 1 day of prison is considered to be 50 euros. So if you owe 2,000 euros, you have to serve 20 days or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong with my 40 days, if I'm wrong with my calculation. We also have seen similar attempt in the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is another entity in the country, at the end of January, where we have seen a proposed amendments to the criminal code, where they would criminalize publishing of any private photo, private video. Even if you record somebody on the street, you have to ask for a permission to publish that law. And that came up in order to the excuse for such an amendment was actually to protect protect women from revenge pornography and unauthorized spreading of the pornographic materials. So again, as an example of, in all of the countries where we mentioned, all the descriptions are quite vague. It's up to individuals who are actually making the laws or who are implementing the laws to decide who should be agent of foreign influence and how they are going to label everything that they actually go through. Another thing I forgot to mention is that in April last year, the draft of the foreign agents law has been shelved, even after several amendments of the proposed draft. And when at the end of January, when the USAID was hit with a 3-month blockade, Dodik, who has some kind of kink, unexplained kink for me on Trump, he was like, I'm encouraged by this, and now we're going to push even harder with the laws. And he announced that the next law that is going to be voted according to him by the end of the March this year is going to be even stricter and even harsher than the previous draft that they proposed. In the previous draft, for example, they have missed the moment where somebody, for example, from Federation, we at BN, for example, we do a lot of sub-granting schemes where we provide grants to smaller media outlets, not just in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but in the region as well. They missed that sub-granting scheme, but now even if we give a grant of, let's say, 2,000 euros to someone, we are also going to be labeled as the agents of the foreign influence, and they have to report that part. It's also, even though it's just in Republika Srpska, the legislation works in a way that if somebody from Republika Srpska is suing me, I have to go to the court in Republika Srpska, because the procedure is not going to be done in Sarajevo, where I live. It's going to be done in front of the Republika Srpska court. So this defamation law that they criminal, they made amendments to the criminal code of Republika Srpska, where defamation became criminalized again, can affect me, even though I don't have any kind of legal connection with the entity except the state level one. The foreign agents law can also affect us in federation and all the media outlets. And it's not just only about media here, it's also about human rights defenders, it's about environmental organizations, it's about LGBT organizations. So they also, Dodik is at the same time when he announced the foreign agents law, he also announced changes to the several other laws where anything related to LGBT and feminism will not be allowed in schools. So all the books have to remove everything that has anything related to LGBT. So it's a set of laws that I think they are going to adopt. When it comes to implementation of those, we already see on the example of the foreign agents of the defamation law that there were more than 80 reports. Some even indictments have been open against human rights activists and journalists. And recently, at the end of the year, we had a case of a journalist from East Sarajevo, Sanja Vaskovic, where the police came knocking on her door because she committed a criminal act of defamation. And she was summoned for questioning because she did journalism. So we see things like that happening, and I'm quite certain that they will push on that law, and they will push on implementation of that law, just because Dodik has deemed a great political timing when the Trump is back on power, and he is encouraged by Musk and his boys from Doge team that have been cutting off funds. We see also those critics. Usually when something happens in Republika Srpska, we see an attempt of something similar being implemented in the federation as well. So at the end of 2023 or start of 2024, the cantonal assembly of Sarajevo canton, which is one of 10 in Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, they also proposed a law which would be regulating internet space and what can be published in online sphere. But after a backlash of international community and local organizations and activists and everything, that has been pulled back from the procedure. If it's going to come back, probably, especially considering the current geopolitical and local political situation. If I forgot something, please remind me, because I said a lot of things. Yeah, when it comes to the Dodik's claims are also same as in Slovakia, same as in Hungary, and other countries where they have this foreign agents law that it's based on American Foreign Agents Registration Act, which is considering only lobbyists and political analysts and stuff like that, who are financed by foreign governments and doing something in the US. And under that cover, they are pushing so many different regulations that are going to limit even further all the possibilities that we currently have on reporting or on activist work. In Republika Srpska, it's also the public space internet is considered public space, but that's a law that has been implemented back in 2015, 16. I can't remember correctly, after a backlash and protests protests that have been held. I can't remember about what, but I think it was regarding the destruction of a park. And then they implemented that law where they now can literally police social media and say, this has been said in a public space, you're going to be responsible for that.
Thank you so much, Azam. And I guess that concludes our session too. In the beginning, the spoofing chapter that Camille explained is also available on the Media Freedom Rapid Response's latest Media Freedom Monitoring Report. If you are interested, please have a look. Previously, we shared it. We shared the link with Kara when she gave the overview. But thank you all for joining us. And Amina, back to you.
Yes, thank you, Gurkan, and thank you all for your insights. We have some questions in the chat, and maybe we can start with those questions. Amir has questioned about Would you say that the media allowing Shechen and his ilk to disclose personal information and passport photos of foreign citizens is an escalation compared to the kind of pressures on CSOs and individuals that are targeted as enemies of state? I think this was targeted to Mila because she answered in the chat, but I'm not sure that you can see her answer, so I will read it. I think it's definitely in line with the official government anti-demonstration narrative. We also had situation following the 2023 December elections when a couple of activist photos were published in online pro-government portals. The photos were taken from the official police ID database. So I would say it's rather an ongoing issue, not necessarily an escalation. Another comment. I've been working on the issue on internet security for some time now, which can certainly be taken under digital rights. What I have found is that people in Serbia are not aware of privacy issues, nor is the way in which they are victims of digital and other types of violence. In addition, I noticed that the laws are not more comprehensive, but the main problem is not the state, but the hackers. But phishing, spoofings, DDoS, various types of fraud, lack of education of the population are mentioned here. That are many, many different ways of cybersecurity attacks that are very hard to recognize. Do we have any comments from the speakers on this? Okay, we have another question from SS. Are you maybe familiar of, let's say, reverse journalists? I have confident example from psychotherapy when information confident to consider employment of Pakistan drivers in public transport unexpectedly appeared on Serbian portal. Question to Kara, do you maybe find some similar cases in your experience? Kara, would you like to take on this?
Yeah, thank you. If I understood the question already, it's sort of targeted at the issue of confidential information being leaked or being published online by journalists. So there is an issue with surveillance just in general. Sometimes you'd hope Pegasus is old news, but then just a couple of days ago, there has been a huge scandal where hundreds of journalists have been spied on with the Pegasus software via WhatsApp. If we're looking at Serbia specifically, there is a trend that journalists, but also civil society is being spied on. Amnesty International published a very comprehensive report about it. And specifically on MapMF, we've had a couple of cases where journalists have been in detention, for example, or they've been questioned by police. And in the meantime, their phone has been searched and they found out because later they installed a software and they could see digital activity on their phone. Yeah, I hope this answers your question.
Thank you, Kara. From Shayla Maslow. Hi all, just to let you know that OSCE mission to BIH has developed a trial monitoring methodology for defamation cases in RS. Fortunately, there have been no indictments yet, but in case there are, the mission is ready to monitor. Also, we are closely monitoring all other legislative developments in BIH and supporting the network of safety of journalists' focal points in prosecutors' offices and police agencies. Please feel free to reach out if you wish to discuss further. Azem, this is probably for you because
I think I said that there have been indictments, but I guess they haven't been confirmed any. And regarding this safety, the contact point for journalists, they don't always work in Bosnia. Like from my experience, when it comes to prosecutors' contact point for journalists, I think the one in Sarajevo works. In other cities, I didn't hear any positive experience when it comes to that.
Yeah, thank you, Azem. I don't see any other questions. I'm not sure if I forgot to read some questions, but I think I covered everything. If we don't have more questions or comments from speakers, then I think we can wrap up today's webinar. I want to thank all of our speakers today for sharing their insights and perspectives. And I would also like to thank everyone who joined us today. I think your questions and comments really made this webinar even more interesting. If you would, of course, like to learn more, please explore Bern's Digital Rights Violation Report and also Media Freedom Monitoring Report. We already shared the links with you all on the chat. I mean, we have heard today some very useful insights, perspectives from different countries, including cases of cyber attacks, private data breaches, pressures on journalists, cases of introducing foreign agent laws. And there are much more room for improvement in different areas, from legal improvements, media freedoms, and cooperation with big tech companies, and many other things mentioned today. And I really hope that we inspired you all to continue advocating for digital rights and media freedoms. So thank you all again for joining us, and yeah, have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.